Welcome to the America's Historic Triangle 3-day itinerary. Usually I do these with the camera on, but it's just giving me a hard time today, so this one will be camera off just so I can get it out. But America's Historic Triangle refers to the area of Williamsburg, Jamestown, and Yorktown, Virginia. They all have played different parts in the founding and starting of America. You could easily spend a whole week in this area going around to all the different historic sites and doing different activities, but I think a 3-day weekend is the perfect length to get just a little bit of everything. This video here is from the first trip that JP and I took together, the day that we spent just exploring Williamsburg. I do recommend on your first day starting off with Williamsburg, specifically Colonial Williamsburg, since that is kind of the highlight and the centerpiece of the area. So Colonial Williamsburg is free to visit and walk around. Parking is a paid parking lot, but if you want to go inside some of the buildings to tour them and do some of the special activities that are included, you will have to buy a day ticket for that. But this is just a little idea of what it looks like when you are walking around. One of the places that you'll want to tour if you do upgrade is the Governor's Palace tour. So this is a replica of the original building that was here. The foundation is original, but this building has had to be rebuilt because of fires in the past. When you go on the tour, it will take you through the whole inside of the building. Here's some photos of some of the main rooms, and then you'll also get to explore the garden out back, and it's just a really nice grounds area. I also recommend the Capitol Building tour. So this is again a replica of what the Capitol Building would have been like back then, and the existing foundation is still there. After you've done everything that you want to do in Colonial Williamsburg, I recommend heading out to the Williamsburg Winery. There is a wine trail in the area, but we didn't have enough time on our visit to explore a lot of them, so we just picked one. And so we decided Williamsburg Winery made the most sense. We're very used to California wines, specifically the Southern and Central California wines. I actually don't care much for a lot of the ones we've had up in like Napa and Sonoma. So I didn't really have high hopes just because a lot of the wines we've had outside of that region are more just kind of like fruit wines that are just kind of like glorified juices. But this one actually had really good quality wines that you would expect as a typical wine and not just kind of like a fruity drink. We did a red wine flight and a reserve wine flight. So generally the reserve wines are going to be a little high quality, a little higher priced. I really loved the Cab Sauv that they had. I tend to go towards the full-bodied, jammy, not too dry type of red. So a Cab Sauv is really, a lot of them tend to be that way. There's some really earthy wines that I have also liked as well. But there's a nice little wine pavilion here where you can sit. You're kind of sitting out on like an open patio, and you just have the tasting sheet with all the information. We like to buy a bottle of whatever our favorite from the tasting is as our little souvenir, so then we get to enjoy it at home later on. Every once in a while there's more than one favorite and we'll splurge on some extras, but we really enjoyed this experience. In the evening, I recommend heading back to Colonial Williamsburg and doing a ghost tour. So Colonial Williamsburg is actually one of the top cities in the US for ghost tours. We have a list here of some of the others that we have done. But there's kind of like an unofficial and an official tour. The unofficial tour is through US Ghost Adventures, and we've done tours with them all over. And what's different about this one is you can add on an EMF reader and you can add on an extended tour it's more so geared towards adults, and some of the ghost stories are more adult content related, but they're not X-rated, I would say. Like any, mid-teens or higher could still appreciate and enjoy this tour. They're not like vulgar. It's just more a little more adult-like content for the stories. So that's a really nice tour that I enjoyed. And the official tour that you can book through Colonial Williamsburg is called the Haunted Williamsburg Tour. So there are a handful of guides that will be doing these tours. Everyone's going to be split up into smaller groups. The guide you get is what kind of determines which buildings you're going to, since they like to spread everyone out across different routes and different buildings, so it's not a crowded experience or where you're waiting, you're spending your tour time waiting on another group. So that's something that I like about the ghost tours here, is that you do get like a handful selection, so you could do multiple ghost tours or do one through Colonial Williamsburg and one through U.S. Ghost Adventures, and you'll get a completely different experience and go to completely different places, which is nice. They dress in the colonial attire. You just follow them by lantern. By the end, most likely, unless you're traveling around like the summer solstice, it's probably going to be pitch black by the time your tour is over. They tend to do these kind of as the sun is setting and as it's getting dark. But that's everything about the ghost tours. On the second day is when you will venture out to Yorktown and Jamestown. So Yorktown is where a Revolutionary War battlefield is located, and then Jamestown is the English settlement that you would probably know from Pocahontas. The story's a little bit different than what's in the movie, but you get the gist of it. So in the morning, you'll want to start in Yorktown, and you'll want to go to the Yorktown battlefield and start at the visitor center. There is a self-guided audio driving tour that you can download. You can also just follow their signs in numerical order to kind of tell you how to drive around. So you won't get lost. The driving tour is just nice to have to give you kind of commentary along the way as you're driving and telling you, the good places to stop, or if it's fine to just kind of, look at as you're driving. And also it just, adds the GPS element to it, so for sure you won't get lost. We do the audio driving tours for everything. Like we did it for Yorktown, obviously. We've done it at the Gettysburg battlefield. We did them for a bunch of driving tours around Maui. We did it for the Outer Banks, a couple different ones out there. And it's just a really easy way to kind of do things on your own time, explore on your own, but still feeling like you have a guide. Here are some of the photos from around there. You can see they've kind of set it up how it would have looked, and you can walk around all of these dirt paths. Those are actual like walking paths that you can go through, so you'll mostly see this kind of in the first portion of the tour. And it did take us about 2 hours to see everything, but we weren't really in a rush. We were just kind of taking our time, exploring, listening to the audio tour. Some other areas that were really nice, this wooded area, when you're going through that portion, is just very scenic. One thing that they tell you in the tour is that none of these trees would have actually been here during the time, so that part is not like historically accurate, because like these trees are not 250 years old, but they look nice now anyway. After you're done driving through the Yorktown battlefield, you'll want to go to the Revolutionary War Museum. It has the indoor museum portion, and then it also has an outdoor living history museum portion. They don't allow photography or videos inside of the museum. I'm sure other people have tried to get away with it, but we try not to break those rules for obvious reasons. But this museum is really well done. It looks like brand new. Everything is super high quality and really like immersive exhibits. It's very vibrant. They do have a portion with like an IMAX screen that kind of surrounds you, and it's a reenactment of the Battle of Yorktown, so it makes it feel like you are in it. It's almost as good as like a virtual reality experience, just without the goggles. So I recommend watching that video if you are able to when you go. And then for us, we went right when it opened in the morning, and then about an hour later is when the outdoor portion opened. So we spent, just about an hour doing all the inside stuff, and then we were ready to do the outdoor stuff the second it opened. They have basically just recreated what the military camps would have looked like, and what locals who had farms, just kind of like what their house would look like, what their fields would look like. they have all these campfires, and the campfires were so nice because it was like a rainy spring day. And so it was just nice and cozy. And then also at the farm, they have someone there that has a 1700s cookbook, and they do cooking demonstrations, and you can actually eat the food that they make there, which is really nice. This video that is linked here has our experience for that day of our trip where we did the Yorktown experiences. Then after you've done everything in Yorktown, I would spend the rest of the day in Jamestown. And this part is a little confusing, but they have historic Jamestown and then they have Jamestown settlement. So historic Jamestown is the actual archaeological site where Jamestown was, and then Jamestown settlement is like the replica of what Jamestown would have looked like, and then also what the local Indian tribes, what their village would have looked like. So I would start out at historic Jamestown. One thing is that the actual site would be underwater because of the shoreline receding, but everything is kind of placed and maintained in like the same layout and as close as possible. Like they still have some burial grounds here, some statues and things like that. If you have a national park pass, you can get a lot of discounts to things in this area, by the way. So I recommend having that on you when you go. This tree here is supposed to be the like exact landing site that they would have come to in Jamestown. When you're exiting the park, there is a building where they do glass blowing demonstrations, and they also have a gift shop where they sell everything that they make at these demonstrations, plus some other, relevant types of souvenirs that you would want from this area. Then you'll go to the Jamestown settlement. So this is a living history museum with the replica and then the Powhatan Indian village. We ended up having to split this over 2 days when we did ours, just because we had a later start. But you can go on the replica ship, you can explore the Indian village and the fort, and they have an indoor portion for the museum as well with some videos and exhibits, but the outdoor portion is really kind of like the main thing. And then this video here shows that day of our trip when we were doing those activities. And then for day 3, I recommend going to Busch Gardens Williamsburg. It's officially one of the prettiest theme parks in the world, so it's not just something I'm saying, like it's an official designation that it has. They were recently celebrating over 50 years of being open. I went as a kid, and I remember when I went, Apollo's Chariot was the brand new big ride. And when JP and I went, they had all these signs celebrating the 20th anniversary. So I was like, wow, that's crazy that it's been that long. Something that I highly recommend doing here is purchasing the all-day dining plan, because it was like $40-something, and you get a meal every like hour and a half with like entree, drink, and dessert. So it is perfect for like 2 or 3 people to share all throughout the day, so you can try a bunch of different things. That's what we did. There's a lot to do here, even if you don't love roller coasters. We had originally bought the whatever their fast pass thing is called, and when we got there, it actually wasn't that busy. And some of the roller coasters, we were like, I don't actually want to spend my day doing all these roller coasters, so they refunded us that. And instead, we were doing like wine tasting around Busch Gardens, because it's all European themed. So it was like going around to different, European countries and sampling their wine. So that was really fun. But I have a whole 1-day itinerary linked with everything about Busch Gardens to get more details for it. And while you are doing all of this, you definitely have to eat. So something that I always do when planning trips is looking up what historic restaurants or like culturally significant restaurants exist in the area. And of course, Colonial Williamsburg has plenty of historic restaurants. The main thing you want to do is eat at one of the historic taverns. We went to King's Arms Tavern, and it originally opened in 1772. And the experience that you do now is going to be as authentic as humanly possible. Our dinner was a candlelit dinner. It was a little bit lighter in the room than what these photos show. We weren't sitting like fully in the dark, but we were at like the last seating for the night, so it was getting darker outside, and you do actually have like a candlelit dinner. So their signature dish is peanut soup, and it is very delicious. It came with these breadstick croutons to dip in it, And they also had a bread service that came with different toppings that you could put on it. And JP also got himself an old fashioned, since that is his favorite drink of choice. For our entrees, we did the tavern dinner. So JP had the herb garlic crusted prime rib with horseradish, fingerling potatoes, and a popover, which is like Yorkshire pudding. And it came with the au jus sauce to pour on it. And he also got to choose his own dessert for that. The peanut soup also came with the tavern dinner, so it was kind of like a 3-course meal. And then I did the beef tenderloin, mashed potatoes, and some veggies. Our dessert was, I don't know if it was called bread pudding, but it was essentially like a bread pudding. And that was just an all-around really great dinner experience. I highly recommend it. Another really historic restaurant to go to is the Old Chickahominy House. So it's a 1700s style dining room, kind of like the tavern. And it really has not been updated since the 60s. So you can kind of see that mix of like old farm style with the colonial style. So I had chicken and dumplings because I just love chicken and dumplings in general. JP had a bowl of chili, and then we also shared the Virginia country ham on hot biscuits. These biscuits are like super dry, super salty, but like actually so good. Every once in a while I get something similar, and I always say like, do you remember that country ham and biscuits from the Old Chickahominy House? This tastes like that, and absolutely love it. It has stuck with me after all of these years. It was also a really cheap meal. For all of this, I think JP probably had a Coke too, since he usually gets one when we go out to eat. Including the tip, it was like $38 for us to eat, which is nice. I feel like most restaurants now for 2 people is easily like $50, $60, even when you're sharing, even though it used to be like $30. So for today's prices, it's a great price, and this is what the building looks like. If you're in the Colonial Williamsburg area, the Dog Street Pub is really nice. It looks like this in the background. They have indoor and outdoor seating. They have a little like pub bar in there. They have the Chowning's Tavern root beer, which is their own kind of like craft made root beer. Root beer is really the only soda that I will drink. So when they have different versions of it, like a local version or like a sarsaparilla or something like that, I always have to try it because it's always so good. For appetizers, we had hummus with fried tortilla chips, and we had Reuben croquettes. So basically everything you'd put on a Reuben sandwich were inside of these, and both were delicious. For our meal, we shared a burger that was also topped with a big slice of ham. This meal was really nice. I enjoyed just sitting outside and enjoying the like surrounding atmosphere. Another one just kind of off the main street of Colonial Williamsburg is the Amber Ox Public House. They allegedly have a ghost. We sat up at the bar for our meal. We were doing this before our ghost tour and didn't have like a whole lot of time. But I tried their non-alcoholic drink called Fairy Tea, and it was an iced green tea with lavender and lemon, which was super cute. I loved it. We also got the bread board. It had 4 different toppings. My favorites were the lemon ricotta and the apple butter. So you could try the different breads with the different butters and sauces, and they were all really good. We also shared a house salad, and it's actually pretty big. Like, if you can see the breadboard here, like the salad was like an entree sized salad, not really like a side house salad kind of thing. I don't know. So as our entree, we shared meatballs that were like fried. It's a very thin fried layer of meatballs. And so we just kind of sampled all of those things as our dinner. Another great place to go, the Candy and Gourmet Shop, that is there on that kind of main shopping street of Colonial Williamsburg. We tried some of their truffles. They have like a huge display of them. We did the Irish cream and the bourbon truffle, but you can kind of like build your own box and sample all kinds of stuff. They have a little bit of everything. Where to stay when you are in Williamsburg. So we've stayed at 2 different resorts. They're actually pretty close to each other, and both of them are set up like townhouse style. First is the historic Powhatan Resort. This room was really cool because it had multi-levels, and like the living room was like in a loft, It had a full kitchen, it had in-unit laundry, you could park right up there at the front. This is the main building where they do activities. So this video here has a tour of what ours looked like. And it also had 2 bathrooms. For it being a 1-bedroom with 2 bathrooms, that was nice as well. The other place I recommend is Greensprings Resort, also townhouse style. This one was a 2-bedroom and it was recently renovated, so it's very modern. The inside could be a resort anywhere. There's really nothing that feels Williamsburg or colonial to it. But the resort itself is really nice and has a good pool area. The primary bedroom had a massive jacuzzi tub, which I love that. And there was just like a lot of space in general. So this is also another great resort. If you want to check out the room tour video, that is linked in there. And that's really everything I have for the itinerary of everything to do in the historic Triangle area. I've linked a few other posts here of some other historic cities that give you a pretty similar vibe. One that I forgot to add in here, I do have a post about a 1-day itinerary for Philadelphia. So possibly by the time you're reading through this post, that may be linked in there. And that's really all that I have for the America's Historic Triangle 3-day itinerary.